last week I did a video on how to adjust the chain on a bike. So we just finished doing the service on this little Kawasaki, and we noticed the chain and sprockets were really, really bad. My student didn't have the money at the time to replace the chain and sprockets, so we just adjusted up and we did a little video on how to align the chain. Today, she's come back and we are now replacing the chain and sprockets on this bike. I just want to do a shout out to AMX, thanking them for their support with this channel. All the parts and tools that I'm using today, the specialist tools like the chain breaking and riveting tool that I'm going to use a little bit later, they're all available from AMX. Just go up and see their friendly staff and they'll be more than happy to help you out. When you're buying the chain, in there you'll see earlier that I'm going to point out, I'm going to point out the difference between the riveted chain, which this one is, and the chain with the link clip. So when you're buying it, if you don't have the specialist tools and you can't afford the specialist tool, then the AMX staff will be more than happy to help you make sure you get the right chain, and they'll make sure you have the right chain and sprockets for your bike so you don't end up with a nightmare. So when changing a chain, one of the first things you need to do is to find the joining link. So rotate your wheel around until you find the joining link. Now you can see here the opening of the link is here. It's always a good idea to remember which way that goes on, so the back of the link points towards the back of the tyre. If you have it the wrong way around, as it goes around, it can open the link and throw this clip off. Now these are pretty well spring. They can be a little bit tricky to get off. One of the simple ways to do it is with a pair of pointy-nose pliers onto the rivet and then try and twist it back. There it goes. And that gets the link off. There is a tool that you can have, a chain separating tool. I'm going to try and do it without that tool because you may not have one. And a good idea of when you do get your chain is to probably buy the chain separating tool at the same time. So one of the tricks to doing this is a short stubby screwdriver. Now remember, this is not what the screwdriver is designed for, so there is a risk you can break the tip, so you don't want to be too forceful with it. Stick the screwdriver in between the links, pull it down, and just gently squeeze with your hand, and don't force it all the way off. Then go to the other side, put the screwdriver in the back, and then just gently squeeze with your hand, and there, I just felt it pop then. Okay, and then one more, and there it goes. So I'm not being too stupid with the force because I don't want to break the screwdriver. You can see how that's starting to march off now. And as we pull this apart, we just push this out here, and that will separate the chain. Now, if you're not changing the sprockets and you're just changing the chain, what you can do now is take your new chain, hook it on here, and then use the old chain to pull it through the front sprocket, and that saves you having to pull this cover off. So you can just feed it through and then rejoin it. But we're changing both chain and sprocket, so we'll get rid of this as well. So my next step now is I've got to remove this cover to get to the front sprocket. Now, in order to do that, we have to take this linkage off with the gear selector. Now, these are on a spline, so a good little tip, you can either get a pen and put a mark there, but that join there, what I like to do is just get a little pin punch, put it just in line with that notch, and just give it a good little tap. That way when you put it back together again, you know where that goes. Spanner, take it in. Right. So just undo this bolt. Now, it looks like a clamp, but it's really not. So what you have to do is completely remove this bolt because it sits in a groove, and I'll show you that in a second once I get this off. So we take the bolt out, and set it aside for a second, and then sometimes you just need to drive a little wedge in here. To help get that spline off. Okay, so then we get the spline off. It's just starting to come away now. Now, if you see the groove here, that groove just there, when that's on, the bolt sits in that groove. So it's very important not just to back the bolt up, you've got to completely remove it. And that stops this from sliding off the shaft if at any point. So you don't lose this bolt, just put it back in there, and that way you're not going to lose it. Now we're going to remove this cover. So just an 8mm socket. Now when you do this and you're taking these bolts out, notice that bolt's really long, set it aside. That bolt's short, put it to the front. And that one's a different size again, so it goes to the top. So you remember which order these go in. Okay, this is a little bit stubborn on here. So just get a screwdriver in and just give it a little bit. Don't want to be brutal with it, but you just want to wiggle it around a little bit so it comes out. It's loose now. Okay, now as a handy little tip, we've laid our bolts out. While you're working around, they're going to get kicked around a little bit. So what I like to do again is to put the bolts back in where they came from, in their order, so you know which bolt goes where, and that way you're not going to lose them on your floor, and you'll always remember which bolt went where, because if you get disrupted while you're doing your work, you will forget. Oh, so on the sprocket here, the front sprocket, we have a washer, and what happens is they fold the washer over the nut to keep the nut locked on. So what we have to do now is we have to flatten this washer out so that we can undo this nut. So just start from the edge and tap in. And go a bit deeper. And starting from the edge. So essentially what I'm doing is starting from the corner here where it's open and then working across. If you start from the middle, all you'll do is push it down harder. So you start from the end, a bit of an angle, and just tap in there. Now I'm not hitting this hard, I'm being very gentle with it because I don't want to damage anything inside the gearbox by being brutal. You see that starting to lift up now? Now let's go with my bigger screwdriver and tap that nice and flat out of the way. Okay, so now what we want to do, we'll just pop this back on a little bit, just a bit, and we're going to put the bike in gear. There we go. And we'll just take that back off again. Now, take our socket, extension bar, and okay. All right. I'm going to cheat now. What we've got now is a rattle gun. That made it a bit easier. These, you don't have to spend a fortune on electric tools if you're only just at the home hobbyist handyman. Ozito will more than do the job for you, and the cheaper. Ryobi is the next grade up. Then if you want to be really on it, then you probably go into your Milwaukees and things like that. But just remember, you're not using it on an everyday basis, so you don't have to go too crazy with it. But really handy to have one of these. That would have taken me a long time to get off, too long than I wanted to spend because of the compression of the engine. And that is your retaining clip. Now, hopefully, in the package that they gave me, hopefully they supplied me with a new retaining clip. But we'll set that aside with the nuts so that we don't lose it. And that's your front sprocket. Remembering, when you look at it, these grooves are really important. You've got to remember which way around that goes. So flat sides out. So don't clean the sprocket, because if you get lost, you'll be able to match up and go, you can clearly see where the washer was by the dirt on here. So don't clean this, there's no point, you're going to throw it away anyway, but set it aside so that you can tell which way around it goes when you go to reassemble this. Because the next thing we're going to do is clean all this up, because there is so much snot in here, it's just silly. That's filthy as. The rapid brake cleaner, just to get in there. So nasty stuff to be spraying around. Careful with your eyes. Make sure you're wearing glasses because it has a habit of spraying back in your face. And see, I'm just giving it all short squirts. And just with a bit of a hard brush, you just want to get in here and just give it a bit of a help to get it in there. Now I'm just going to use a bit of wax and grease remover. I've got most of the dirt and everything off. The brake parts cleaner dries out very, very quickly. So just having something a little bit wetter going over it, just to do the final clean. And again, only just short squirts with it, because a little bit goes a long way. If you do big long squirts, you'll empty the can very quickly. You just need to go squirt, 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 then give it a scrub, then squirt, squirt, squirt. And then again, just with a soft brush now that most of the crap's on, just to do that final clean to get in there and make it look a lot nicer. Just giving the chain guide a bit of a clean up as well. I like to clean everything as much as I can, because when you put the new chain on, you don't want all this crap and everything running all over it. So the more of this crap you can get off your bike, the better it's going to be for your new chain. So now that I've cleaned it down with the wax and grease remover, it's all quite wet. So now I'm just going to use the rapid parts cleaner again, just to give it a final blow down, and that will dry and help evaporate all the stuff I've put on there, so we haven't got any solvents sitting in there, because this remover will dry it all out. So I want it nice and clean, because I will be putting some grease and everything in here when I replace the sprocket. And it's all dry, it's ready for reassembly. So what I'll do is I'll put the front sprocket and everything on now before I start playing with the back. That way I'm only working at one end of the bike at a time and I don't have stuff going everywhere. I like to spray a little bit of white grease on there, just around here. It's not for lubricant or anything like that, it's just to stop it from rusting and having the parts corrode together. You can use a little bit of grease on your finger. You don't need a lot, you just need to help stop it from rusting. So we're just going to spray a little bit of white grease around it. Again, no need to go too crazy with it. Just get a nice little coat, and that way it's not going to rust. So that's going to be the side where the lock nut goes, and that's going to go to the inside. Now, when your rear sprocket is worn, there's a good chance that your front sprocket is worn as well. So we take the front sprocket and we have a look at it, and you can see how the grooves in here have opened up compared to that. You see it's kind of wider here than what it is here, and you can see how the tooth has got like a wave happening. You see it's got like a hook and it's coming around like an ocean wave. Okay, that will actually start to stretch your chain. So when you put your new sprocket on, or if you're replacing the rear, you should do the front as well. So we just gently wind it down. Right. Now there will be a torque setting for this, but most of us don't have torque wrenches. Again, we don't want to be brutal with this, we just want to give it a little nip up. Okay, we don't want to wind in and risk stripping the bolt. If you strip the bolt because you're getting too heavy-handed with this, it's a big problem. Remembering the nut won't come loose because we're going to fold that retaining ring back over the nut to stop it from coming off. So you don't have to go stupid tight with them. What I'm doing, I'm not going to use the same part that's folded over before, because if I fold that again, it'll snap. So we go to a new section, just a screwdriver in behind, and again, just light little taps, just to start it folding over. Okay, so just be patient, take your time with it. Remember, don't force anything. You want to knock that down nice and snug onto the flat part of the nut. And because that's on the spline, that nut now will not come undone. Alright, so now that I've got all that back together, I'm going to start to work on the back, and that way I don't have parts laying around everywhere. I'm not going to put the cover back on yet. I've still got to give this cover a clean, because I don't want that snot getting on my new chain. But I always like to work on one part of the bike at a time, and that way I'm not getting bolts and everything mixed up, and you don't end up with a whole lot of stuff and you go, where does this go? Okay, so like we learnt in the last video, first thing I want to do is loosen off the adjusters. So, one to bolt up. So you have the spanners like that, and then you just squeeze, and that will undo the lock nut. Wind the lock nut back off the way, so it's nice and free, and then we do the same on the other side. Screwdriver through against the swinging arm, and just pull the clip out. Now we'll undo the nut. Remembering, we hold the bolt, and then we turn the nut. Okay? And we just take the nut right off this time, so we get rid of it altogether. .14mm ring spanner is about the generic size for these. All right, holding the wheel and push. And these are really tight and it'll break. Yep. So I'm not going to bore you to death with undoing every one. That's how to do it. I'm going to go back to my rattle gun because it's a lot faster. But I thought I'd just show you how to do it with a spanner, because not everyone's got one of these, but they make life so much easier. Now, being really professional, these are a special lock nut. Can you see the way the end of the thread's shaped? So typically, these are kind of really a use once only thing. All right, but you know, it's okay to use them again. But if you want to be really, really careful in protecting your bike, just use them once. But they don't. Okay. So now with this, just lift straight up. Okay. Now let's compare this to the new sprocket. Careful look at the shape of the sprocket, and can you see the shape of the tooth there? How it's got a definite like pyramid, and the teeth are flat. So you see that pyramid there, that chamfer, and the teeth are flat, and how even the groove is. Yeah. Now we compare that to the old chain, and you can see how it's opened right up. They're really sharp, and it's starting to get a bit of a wave on it. You can see how the teeth are starting to curl over like a wave cresting. That sprocket is well and truly dead. As soon as you start to lose this, this edge of the tooth, that is when you just start to think about changing your sprocket. So usually you'll get 2 chains to 1 sprocket. And then on goes the sprocket. Then we return our nuts. Now, really important when you're screwing the nuts on, make sure they're nice and loose. If it doesn't screw down evenly right from the start, your thread could be damaged. But you generally tell that when you're taking the nuts off, because there'll be a fight all the way off. They'll be hard all the way off. They won't come off freely. So just screw them down by hand. Okay, so as you screw it down, you'll notice that as they come down, because it's a special lock nut, it gets tight before the sprocket gets tight. So now it's firmed up a bit. So what I'm going to do is going back to my 14mm spanner. Okay. I'm just going to wind this one down until it makes contact. Now it just made contact. I'm not pushing it any further than that, and I'm going to go to the one diagonally opposite. Wind it down until it makes contact. Then go to the next one. Just wind it down until it makes contact, then go across. So notice how I'm going across the sprocket, because when I pull it down, I want to make sure that it's actually sitting evenly on the thing and not resting on one of these spaces. So it comes down, nice, all right, make sure that's in, and then tighten up again. If you have a torque wrench, you can Google the torque settings, but I'm going to tighten that up firmly by hand, tighten that one up firmly by hand, tighten this one up firmly by hand, tighten this one up firmly by hand, again, Again, now, without being too stupid with your rattle gun again, we'll get that and we'll just give them a final nip up. So, again, and then you go around each one. Notice how I'm not giving it as much now, just to make sure that you've got every one. Just in case when you're going diagonally, you might lose count and you might miss one. So at the final torque down, you want to go around the whole lot and make sure you've got them all on. While we're here, what you want to do is just pinch your fingers across the disc and gently pull out, and what you're looking for is a big lip here and massive groove. So this is not looking too bad, it's nice and smooth. Just come across, and if there's a big lip here, then it's probably time to change your rear disc. So checking the pads, all right, see these grooves here? All right, nice deep grooves, so those pads are right. If those grooves are getting right down, if it's almost flat, pads are due to replace. But here's an interesting thing. Look at the piston. See the rust on the piston? See that rust there? That piston's done. All right, because what's going to happen now, I'm going to have to open these pads up a little bit to get it back onto the disc, and if you put brand new pads on, it's going to push that piston back in through these rubber seals, and that rust is going to tear the seals and cause brake leakage. What you want to do is put your finger in here and turn this bearing, and make sure that bearing just turns nice and smoothly. You shouldn't feel any click, 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 click. If you're feeling click, 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 then that bearing needs to be replaced. And again, we'll just do the same with those. So I just stick the finger in and making sure that bearing is nice and smooth. A tiny bit of grease, and you just want to make sure you just got a little bit of grease on this shaft, and it's just, again, just for a bit of protection. Okay? And that way, it's going to be not rusting inside the rear wheel. Now this bit is going to be a bit controversial because there's always a lot of two schools of thoughts with this. Now, when I pulled the axle out, I pulled it out this way. So when I'm putting it back in, you've got to kind of juggle the rear wheel, juggle the spacers, juggle the rear brake and the spacers to try and get in. And it can be really, really, really difficult to get in. It can be a bit of a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is take the bolt out, and we are going back through the other way. So, all right, so again, we are just going to pop the axle in, okay, and now we're just going to take the rear brake, wheel it around in position, and then just put the axle through a little bit more. Now that all sits in spot, all right, and that's going to make it a lot easier for you to help locate this rear wheel into the swinging arm. Then we want our, now that's looking a bit scungy, so I'm just going to grab a rag, clean it up, and put a little bit of grease on it. Fancy with it, just give it a little bit of clean up, get the old grease off, make sure the dirt's out of the way, because there is a seal that this sits on to keep the water out of the bearing. So let's give that a clean up, and you can see the seal here. Okay, that helps to keep all the water and grit and everything out and keep the bearing clean. You give that a clean up, and give the seal a little bit of a wipe. I don't want to put solvents in here. I don't want to be using the brake cleaner in here to clean this up, because the brake cleaner will actually harm the rubber. Just clean it with a dry rag and get it as clean as we can. And then just a little smear of grease. You don't have to be too crazy with it again. Okay. Good little thing, less is more. And see how loose that is? So that seal, it's just trying to fall out. That seal should typically hold that spacer in place. I've greased up the other seal, given it a clean up. I'm just going to pop it in the other side there. Now this is where the fun begins. Making sure these don't fall out now because you've just greased them up. I'm going to roll the wheel into position. Okay. And now using my knee again, I'm going to get it under the wheel. I'm going to try and pull that wheel back without losing. And now I can just push the axle through. And if you haven't done this before, how easy was that? If you're going through the other way, you've got to try and line the spacer, the disc brake holder, and this spacer together, balancing off that. It's much easier to go through from the brake side. It's just a bolt. And now for the chain. Yeah, my students has opted for the DID. DID is a great brand. You get all different types of chains. Now this one has got an X ring, solid bush, and it's silver. All right. So let's have a look, and I'll try and explain what an X ring is. So now we've got our chain out. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop open the link pack, just to show you what's in here. So one, you always get a little packet of grease. Then we'll have our O-rings, our retaining plate, and our joining link. Now, this joining link doesn't have a clip like the other one did. This one needs to be riveted, and that is when you need a riveting tool. So on here, there's a riveting pin on this side, okay, and a push on that side. So it's very important that when you buy the chain, that you understand the difference between a chain that has a link and the link chain. You see these deep grooves here? That link clips into those grooves. So there's a big round part there that goes on, and the clip, and you just use the pliers and pull that clip on, remembering that it has to face that part to the back of the wheel. So, and going on, put your spacer over, your retaining plate, and that clip goes on. Now, O-ring and X-ring. All right, I'm going to try and put this on something a little bit white so you can see it. Now, if you see, look very closely here, can you see how there's a groove in the O-ring? Yeah? There's a little groove in between the two places there. And then with a normal O-ring, it's just round. So you can see the difference between the two of them. So the X-ring is actually better quality because it's going to seal on the inside and the outside. So it actually helps to seal the grease inside the bearing. Now, when we're saying the bearing, now this here is the bearing. So when they assemble this from the factory, this link inside here is all packed with grease. Okay, it's all packed with grease, and the idea of the O-ring or the X-ring is to sit over that and stop that grease from coming out, and to stop the water and everything from going in. Okay, so I'm doing my best to keep the chain out of the dirt. So if you're doing this in the back garden or anything like that, because, you may not have a concrete driveway, but well, it's good to have it on concrete when you put the stands up. Try and keep it out of the dirt. I know it's going to get dirty anyway. And then we just put the chain on. Now, again, be really careful here. Try not to get your fingers caught between the chain and the sprocket. Even though there's no tension on the chain this way, it is here. So if you get your fingers caught underneath, that chain will still pull into it and it can still do damage to your fingers. So we just want to glide it along. Just coming around the other end of the bike, pulling the chain through, over the sprocket. Now before I put the sprocket in gear, it's good to have the bike back in neutral so you can just wind that sprocket around. And the chain is coming out of the packet nicely. Pull that a little closer in. And we are just bringing it out. And you get to here, and you might go, oh no, my chain's too small. But you've got to remember, it's a new chain. So we have to pull the back wheel forward. That's why I didn't do it up tight. Now, the link will fit. So, we take the link, right, and this is where we need. Now, when you tear it off, there's actually a little rip tab for you to tear that along. Don't go cutting it because there's a little point here that when you squeeze it, the grease is going to come out of a nice little fine hole. Yeah, and we want that hole because we want to fill this with grease. So your grease gets squirted into that link. And the same again, we move the grease up and we need to squirt the grease into the link. Okay? Pop the O-rings over and then just put that little bit of grease back on again. Okay? The main part of the grease is inside. So the grease went through from this side, so I'm just going to poke this through this way a little bit and back through that way a little bit. And I just want to try and make sure I get as much grease as I can into that bearing. Okay, and the same with this way, because I pushed it through here. Try and push that grease all the way through, push the grease all the way through, and just really make sure I've got a nice, good, liberal amount of grease in that bearing. Okay, and then that will just clip up. I've still got my O-ring on there. I found my missing O-ring, I put it on. It really makes sure, because I was mucking around poking it through, the O-rings dropped off. All right, so we got that on, and now we'll get the other parts. We'll put our other O-ring. Putting the tool on. Now there's 2 divots here, okay? They need to go onto these pins. So we take it around and we locate that onto the 2 pins. Like that, and you'll feel it'll lock in when it's ready, okay? And you put your link back on, making sure your O-rings don't fall off. That's where it gets really tricky. And this one goes on that way, because we're not ready. Turn your tool around. There's the flat part there. This is going to slide over the top, and the whole lot will locate on. Okay, so you just do that finger tight, and then make sure it's all still kind of loose on the chain, but everything's all held in spot. And by twisting it like this, you'll know whether that link is sitting on the pins or not. Big rig spanner, okay, 27 mil. Let's slot that on, and a little 19 mil, and all we want to do is start to push these together. And what that's going to do is push that link onto the chain, and you'll feel it get firm when it's in. So it's going to be moderately tight, and now that's getting firm, that's locked up. So now we take that off. Now that still needs to come through a little bit more. See how it hasn't come through enough yet? Okay, and have a look. I can still see my 4 O-rings are there, but I've got to pull that through further. Make sure that's locked on. Okay, ready? And we're just going to wind that on a bit more. Now that's gotten really firm. We take it back off again. And we have another look. Okay, now you can see that is clearly on, and the link is not stiff. If you've gone too tight with it, that link will be stiff, so you don't want to do that, because then you've crushed the O-rings too much. Right, so that's on nicely. Now it's time to rivet them down. This tool it's actually offset. See the offset part? So what you need to do is bring that around, and we are going to pinch down on this link. So when it locks in, you see how the offset is going to allow me to slide the riveting tool over that pin. It comes in, and you want to make sure that it's located properly. If the pin doesn't line up evenly, it means the backing plate's not on. And now that is sitting right squarely on the pin. There we go. Okay, make sure that's sitting squarely on top of the pin. And now, again, I hold the tool and spin the bolt. And what that'll do is mushroom the top of that pin to form a rivet so the pin won't come off. So now that I've riveted that down, you can see how it's burred the end of it. Okay, it's not the prettiest job. That's burred the end, so that link's not coming off. Now, turn your tool over so the chamfer's facing the other way, so you can do exactly the same with the other side. Okay, we wind it up. Okay. And you can stop there. Stop. Now, as you can see, the second one is a bit of a nicer burr on it, whereas the other one, the tool has slipped off the side. But that's not going anywhere. That chain won't come off now. What you're doing is you're starting to wind a bit of tension back on the chain and get it even. So what we do is we count the notches and we continue to adjust the adjusters back. And so right now I've got 1, 2, 3.5. So you see that line there is in between those two. And I want to come around the other side and make sure I've got 1, 2, 3, and that's a little bit off of a half. So, and that chain is getting pretty close to where we want it. So now we want to make sure we've got the wheel square. So that's square by the notches. So what we're going to use this time, last time I presented to you how to line the chain up using some string. All right. And I got a lot of grief from a lot of people going, oh, you should use a laser chain liner. Yeah, but not everyone has one. But everyone's got a piece of string. So you've got a bit of string, you can line the chain up with a bit of string. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn the laser on, and hopefully the camera will pick this up. There's a little red dot coming out here. That's the laser. So when we put it on the sprocket, can you see how it's sitting just in between the two links? Is that showing up on the camera? The red dot? Now we're just going to slowly lift the chain along, and you see how that dot is traveling. You might want to go this way. You see that chain, that dot is traveling up the chain. Now see how it's going away from that and going to the center of the link. Is that showing up? Okay, so what we need to do now is I need to twist the wheel back towards me, all right, to bring that back into line. It's starting to get a little bit tight. Okay, I might just give that a knock. That's a bit loose. Okay, let's firm that up. The rear sprocket. Now that is starting to look a lot better. You can see the dot is sitting on top of the links. That chain is almost bang on. I just want to come a fraction, nip them up. What's my tension like? Tension's pretty loose. So again, like we said before, we're going to lean. If I was doing this on my own, I would lean over the top and adjust adjusters. For the sake of this, I'm going to get my trusty assistant to sit on the bike. I'm going to do the final adjustments and lock it down so we get the correct tension, and then I'll just show in the video afterwards. Okay, so you can see now that that's changed the tension. All right, so we need to bring that back. I'm just going to wind this back evenly. 1 and 1. Okay, so hopefully that turned out all right in the video. That did take a little while to get in. Now, important thing to know is as you're aligning this and you're running the chain along, so if you can see that red dot moving further and further up the chain, and it's just sitting nicely in between the links. So that chain is pretty well bang on now where we need it to be. Now, if you have to loosen the other side off to swing the arm, once you've loosened it, you just give like CPR to the back wheel and always push it forward. And once you've adjusted, you always check the slack. Okay, so that's tightened up now because my student's no longer on the bike. When she was sitting on the bike, that was a bit looser. Okay, so always know that there is a difference when there's weight on the bike. It does change the length. Now, I don't need to go spinning the tire now to look for the tight spot and the weak spot because it's a new chain. Right. So making sure those caps stay nice and tight. Again, we hold the bolt and turn the nut. Hopefully that didn't show up. And you don't need to do these in the next month. You just need to line the hole up like that. Nice and firm. And just pop the clip down. Give it a spin. Make sure that's okay. Make sure these are still tight. Final look at the chain. The chain is still perfectly in line and it's all locked down. If you go yanking on the bolt, you can kind of twist it and thing in. Now that's locked down, all that we do is we just want to tighten up these lock nuts to stop them from coming undone. Okay. Now, handy little thing here, on the bolt there's a little flange, yeah? Now that little flange sits inside here. A common thing I see when people put these on, it gets caught and it chews these out. So when you put them on, make sure that it drops in behind that flange, because that's designed not to actually clamp overly hard on that plastic surface. And you can see how that's all damaged? You there? That's because someone's pinched it in. Okay? When you're doing it up, wiggle it up and down. There it goes. Just pinch them for a second. And now that's on. So now we've got that cleaned up. Now you can clearly see how this has been damaged by someone that hasn't actually located it in properly when they put it together. And that's probably because of all the amount of crap and grease. It would have been really hard to line these holes and make up. So it's really important to clean these parts when you're doing it. So remembering, we put our bolts in so that we can remember where they went. So we take them back out again. Taking them out again and laying them in the order in which I took them out. So I know that one's at the bottom, that one's at the top, and that one's at the front. And we bring our cover back over. Locate it over the sprocket first, and you're going to have to get it past this rubber hose. In it goes, and you can feel that's nicely located home. And because we've got the bolts in order, we're not going to risk damaging anything. Again, these are only just panel bolts, they don't have to be stupid tight. Now remembering, we put a nice little centre pop mark right where that joint had to go. That's